Good morning, one and all. Welcome to Principles of Information Security class. In this class, we can discuss about sniffer, then access control mechanisms. So, what is sniffer? Sniffer is a program or a device that can monitor the data traveling over a network. We have a network, so you can monitor the data traveling through that network by using a sniffer. So maybe it's a program or it's a device. We can use this sniffer as an authorized one or an unauthorized one. So unauthorized sniffers can extremely dangerous to a particular network, or it will be dangerous to network security, because they are virtually impossible to detect and can be inserted almost everywhere. So these sniffers can be used both for legitimate network management function and for stealing information from a network. If we want to steal some data information from a network, you can use a sniffer program or sniffer device. Or it can be used as a protecting device or a legitimate network management. For legitimate network management, we can also use the sniffer program or sniffer device. So it has both positive and negative side. And this sniffer often works on TCP/IP network, where they are sometimes called packet sniffers. If we are using the sniffer program or a device in a particular TCP/IP network, we can call it as packet sniffers. Okay, so sniffer is a program or a device, and while we are using the sniffer program, we can monitor the data that is traveled through a network. Okay, and the next topic is access control mechanism. You had already studied some access control. What do you mean by access control in cryptography and network security? So we can study access control mechanisms here. We have a client and a server. Once a client and server have established a secure channel, the client can issue some request to the server. Okay, and what is the purpose of the server? They provide some services to the client. And requests are generated by or initiated by the client, and these requests are processed by the server, and they give services to the client. And this request can only be carried out if the client has a sufficient access rights. So if the client has a sufficient access rights, if they have a permission to access the services from the server, this request can be processed by the server. So the verification of these access rights actually known as access control. If that particular client has a permission to access this service, which is verified by some authority, and that verification process is known as access control. Okay, and after verification, the authority will grant the access right. That is actually known as authorization. That client is an authorized person for accessing that particular service from a server. Okay, so these two terms are used in interchangeable manner. So what is access control? Access control is actually the verification of access rights. What is actually the access rights? If a particular client has a permission to access some service from or some resources from the server, that is actually access rights. That verification process is known as access rights. After verification, we can grant the access rights. That is known as authorization. Okay. After getting an access right, that person is or that client is an authorized person. Otherwise, it is an unauthorized person. If the client do not have any access rights, they are unauthorized clients. Okay. So For implementing this access control, we have subject and object. In between there is a reference monitor. So from source or from subject, users and processes are examples for the subjects, and they request for a particular operation to the server, and the server contains some resources like files, printers, etc., or some services other, and they are objects, and these requests are monitored by some reference monitor and they will be processed. If it is an authorized request, these objects will be given to the subject. This is the actual mechanism that is coming under access control mechanism. Okay. So what are the access control elements, or what are the components of access control? We have subject or principal, and it's an active entity. Also there is an object, it's a passive entity. There will be access operations, and these are the main three entities in an access control mechanism. So what are subjects? Users, processors, etc. are the examples for the subjects, and they are the source of the request. So they can be divided into three main classes, that is owner, group, and world. Another entities or another element is object. It is a passive entity. Here files, directories, records, and programs, etc. are coming under this object. Also we have access operations: read, write, execute, delete. What are the operations a particular client needs from a server? They are known as access operations. So actually this access operations varies from basic memory or file access to method calls in an object oriented system. So subject issues some request to access the object, and actually the protection is given by the reference monitor, and that knows which subjects are allowed to issue which request. And the ability to allow only authorized users, programs or process systems or resource access, the granting or denying according to a particular security model of certain permissions to access resources. How we can give a granting for that access rights or denying based on some security model? We can give the permissions to a particular client or particular subject. So an entire set of procedures performed by hardware, software, and administrators to monitor the access, identify user requesting access, record access items, and grant or deny access based on the pre-established rules. So there will be a set of rules for processing this verification process for giving an access rights to a particular client. Okay, for that we can use some hardware, software, or administrators to monitor the access and identify the users requesting access and record these access attempts, and if it is okay, we can give the permission to access, otherwise we can deny. All these mechanisms are based on some pre-established rule. Based on a network or security model, we have a number of rules. Based on that rule, we can give the permission or access rights to a particular client. So actually, access control is a heart of the security. So for where we are implementing these security mechanism or access control mechanism, example is Facebook. You can give your personal information, and you can set here such that if this personal information is seen by the owner itself, or by using, or by public, or by private. Okay, you can set the permissions. Also you have an access permissions you can set in firewall and also in a web browsers. So in a particular network, we have some user is accessing some services from server. This will be monitored by the security administrator, and also there is a need of authorization database. It will store all the access permissions to all the users. There will be an authentication function and access control function to verify the access rights and for giving or granting permissions to the particular users, and all these will be audited by some auditors. Okay. So there are actually two access control policy models. One is DAC and one is MAC. One is discretionary access control and another one is mandatory access control. This will be studied in later videos. So access control policy models means how these access control policies are configured and managed. They will be explained by these two models. Which are they? They are DAC and MAC. DAC means discretionary access control and another one is mandatory access control. Also in this access control policy models we have another one, that is RBAC, that is role based access control. Okay, that will be also studied in later video. And what are the access control mechanism for implementing this access control in a system? We can use some access control matrices and access control list, capability list and role based access control. All these are coming under access control mechanism. Okay. So you can see an example in Unix and Windows. This is as an access control mechanism that is implemented in Windows operating system as well as in Unix operating system. You can set some permissions. You can see in Unix file access control you can see permissions for read, write and etc. You can check that checkbox for giving the permissions, as well as in Windows you can set some permissions. If the file control, if you are providing full control or for modification or for reading and for writing, you can tick the checkboxes to give the permissions. Next one is access control mechanism. So access control mechanism is one of the access control metrics. So access rights are defined individually for each combination of subject and object. So we are giving some access rights to particular subject for a particular object. Actually this access control matrix is a matrix in which each subject represented by a row and each object represented by a column. So for a particular system, first you find out the subject and object and actions. So SOA. You have to identify a triple, that is SOA. S is the set of objects and O is the set of subjects, and O is the set of objects and A is the access matrix. Okay, so S it's a set of subjects, O it's a set of objects, and R it's a set of rights, and entries A represents the actions. Okay, you can see in this figure, this is an example for access matrix, that is access control matrix. You have subjects and each row is represented by subjects and each column is represented by objects. There will be also subjects can be represented in column also. So one of the example is we have three subjects, Alice, Bob and Charlie. You have three resources like file A, file B and file C. And in first row you can see read. They are the permissions. So Alice can read the file A, file B and file C, but can't write any three of these files. For Bob, you can see only file A can read and write. For file B and file C, there is no access permissions or access rights. For Charlie, you can see for file A, there won't be any permissions, but for file B and file C, Charlie has the permission to read and write. Okay, so this is an example of access control matrix. You can see another example. User A, user B and user C are the three subjects and objects, file 1, file 2, file 3 and file 4. From this matrix, what you have to get as the information is, A is a subject, access mode is on, that is A has its own file, that is file 1. Owner of the file 1 is A. He can read and write. Okay. And for file 3 also they owned by user A and it can read and write. Okay. So for implementing this access matrix, we can use some list representation for representing this access matrix in data structure. So file 1 A, which is owned by A and can read and write. But for B, you can see read only. So there will be a pointer to B structure list. Here only read permission is there. Like that you can create some data structure or list implementation for each file. Also you can create a capability list for users subject. So you can create some access control list for resources objects, and for subjects you can create some capability list. It is something like a linked list mechanism. Okay. Then what is access control function? So first you have subjects. If you are requesting a read operation for the file system, so here you are checking some access control mechanism if it is accessed by, if that subject has the permission to read that file. Then if it's okay, that file will be read by S1. So all this will be monitored by some access metrics monitored, and from that we can create some access metrics. Based on this access metrics, we can give access rights to particular subjects for a particular object. So these are all about access control mechanism introduction and access control metrics. Thank you.